Alright, so I ran the spark plug wires to the distributor. I also ran a new wire from the starter solenoid off the ignition side to the coil pack. I'm running a original coil pack off of the motor. I am going to order a new one right there. So still want to replace that distributor because it's still the factory distributor that came off the engine originally. I rewired the starter solenoid wire for the hot wire going on the starter. The wire I think was too thin of a gauge, so I have the constant power here, this thick one, and then the starter switch wire going down this way. This screw here is for the starter switch, and according to the wiring diagram, it's supposed to be a blue with red wire coming to the switch right here, but I don't have a blue with red, so I'm still trying to figure out which one of these on this side for the key ignition switch down to the starter. So I'm still trying to figure that out. So in the meantime, what I've been trying to do is get some just testing the starter out, make sure the engine turns over. I'm jumping the wire from the battery terminal to the starter switch position on the solenoid, and that should turn the engine over. So the battery's weak, that's why it's on the charger right now. I'm letting that charge up, and I'm gonna let that charge up, and I might put some starter fluid in it, see if I can get that fuel pump going, and go from there. One, two, three. Watch your ears.
Whoa. Why don't you let it stay like that?
Huh?
Let it stay like that first.
It smells like fire right now. The starter keeps going, see it? Ooh, it sounded nice too. Ready?
God damn.
Alright, so now what I'm doing is I took the original coil pack off because I got the new one to mount that goes just right here. I'm going to fix that. Open wire right there. That goes to the ignition coil. And I'm also going to be mounting up the power steering bracket. So you can see I already mounted it to the head right here. The original cast iron heads would have came with a third hole up here to mount this top bolt, but you can see there's not one there. So I'm going to mount the power steering pump to this guy now. I've already mounted the alternator with the alternator bracket. You can see that it matches up. I've already mounted the power steering bracket, the front piece to the actual power steering pump. So I got that here. This is my third attempt to belt, also for the alternator and for the water pump and power steering. So I'm going to be doing that right now. So this is the one I originally bought off Rock Auto, but it was just so much larger than needed here. And you can see it's still too loose. That's all the way out, and it's just too loose. If I had like an idler pulley like right here mounted, that'd be a different story, but I don't. So unfortunately this one is still not the right one, and this one is 48. I probably need at least a 49 3/4 or a 50. Alright, so I mounted up the Edelbrock ignition coil. That's there now. It's mounted to the intake, so it should be pretty good to go. Alright, so here goes take 5 on the power steering belt. I was able to get the alternator belt on nice and tight. I did that from underneath, and it's on there. It's good to go. Now it's just the alternator, oh, excuse me, the power steering pump belt that wraps around the water pump and the crank. Let's try that. And that's the one. So right now I got the power steering pump loose, as you can see, but I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this down so that we can get tension on this belt and move on to the next step. Alright, so I got the belt on like you saw. I bolted up the water pump pulley just with 2 bolts for now because I'm not sure if I'm going to run an electric fan yet. I'm leaning towards using an electric fan, but I'm leaving that on there right now just so I can run the engine. And what else did I've done? I put all the clamps on for the bypass hoses. I ran all the upper and lower radiator hose for the water pump, an antifreeze to be filled, and I started to put antifreeze, or I started to want to put antifreeze in the radiator, and I started finding this in the radiator, a rat's nest. That's a first for me. So all this stuff I had been pulling out of the radiator to see if I could salvage it, but I'm not going to risk it. So I'm going to go ahead and buy a new radiator. So I'm going to disconnect the upper and lower radiator hoses because I don't want any of that stuff getting sucked up into the engine. I'm glad I opened that before I ran the engine again. I don't want none of that stuff getting sucked up into the engine. Alright, so I was working on the throttle linkage, and the way the throttle cable works is basically you can hear the gas pedal. If I do this, you can hear the gas pedal moving. Problem is that the original linkage was down here, so this throttle goes this way. So I relocated the screw up here so that we can rev the engine this way with the cable going as easy as that when it revs. Problem is, now the throttle's too short. It's just a little too short. So I got to figure out if I'm going to get a universal throttle cable, hook it up to the gas pedal. I got to figure that out still. Let's see. Off camera, I did finish installing the cross member. I don't know how well you can see that here, but let me see. So you can see the cross member is mounted to the transmission with all new bolts on the transmission mount. I also hooked up the exhaust to the headers. The exhaust that was on the car where the car came to me, it had exhaust on it still. So for now I just wanted to put the headers hooked up to the exhaust, into this 2-inch exhaust, but I'm actually going to be using 2.5 inch all the way back. So that's coming. Once I get the car running and moving, we'll work on the exhaust once it's up on the lift. But for now, this is just temporary.